Imran Khan.
पाकिस्तान जिंदाबाद।
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम जी। आज का जो शो जो है वो बड़ा वाकई में बहुत ज़्यादा स्पेशल है, क्योंकि हम बहुत सी चीज़ें पर बात करना चाहते हैं और ऐसे मेहमान को हमने आज मदऊ किया है कि जिनका इससे बहुत ज़्यादा ताल्लुक़ है। इस वक्त जो पाकिस्तान के हालात हैं उनसे डायरेक्टली उनसे बहुत ज़्यादा ताल्लुक़ है। हमने जब इनसे रब्ता किया तो वो थोड़े से रिलक्टेंट थे और वो चाहते थे कि वो शायद इस प्लेटफॉर्म पे ना आए, क्योंकि ये पीटीआई का प्लेटफॉर्म है। लेकिन हमने उनको फिर बताया कि क्योंकि आप जो हैं, आपकी कोई भी सुनवाई कहीं पर भी नहीं हो रही, इतनी बड़ी स्टोरी आपने ब्रेक की और उसके बावजूद लोकल मीडिया उसको कवर नहीं कर रहा, ग्लोबल मीडिया उसको कवर नहीं कर रहा, और सपोजली ये चले स्टोरी ऑफ द सेंचुरी ना सी, लेकिन स्टोरी ऑफ द डेकेड तो ज़रूर होनी चाहिए। तो प्रॉब्ली आपको आइडिया होगा कि कौन हमारे साथ हैं। Ryan Grimm, the story by Ryan Grimm on Interceptor. Ryan, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time, buddy.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey, the first question on a lighter note, but what is the source of your story?
Yeah, that does seem to be what the majority of the speculation is back in Pakistan around this story. But I can't say much more than what was in our article. This was a source from the Pakistani military who shared the document with us. We through a variety of different means, checked the contents, the substance, and the kind of markings of the document in order to make sure that this was authentic and something that we could something that we could publish with confidence. And the other thing that we did is that and this is unusual in our reporting, we also specified who was not our source, and we wanted to make clear that our source was not Imran Khan, was not anybody in his circle, and was not any civilian functionary in the Pakistani government.
Ryan, critics would say that your story is a single source story. There is only one person who you believe that has contacted you, or you contacted them. We don't know anything. Were you already working on this story, or just one fine morning somebody contacted you and be like, we want to give you the story, and why don't you publish it? How did it happen? And did you make sure that this one person, because as far as I know, it's a single source story, did you check with the government, their part on this?
So, as you may know, I interviewed Chairman Khan former Prime Minister Khan, back in, I believe, in early June for my podcast, Deconstructed, and my show Counterpoints, or our show Counterpoints. I co-hosted, and after that, and as we were continuing to work on stories related to the crisis in Pakistan, a source contacted us, and then we did the type of due diligence that journalists do around documents. And so it would be fair to say that it was initially in a single source that reached out. But when you have a document that you can then cross-check against other elements and other ways of understanding whether or not this person is who they are, is who they say they are, would be in a position to be able to have access to a document like this, and on and on. And so we felt by the end extremely confident in our reporting, and it has been subsequently borne out as authentic. You've had
you understand, right after your story, they filed a case against Imran Khan. Their foreign minister is in their custody, judicial remand, and then there is another minister, Sadumar, that also with them. So do you think that it was probably pre-planned that they gave you the story, you published it, and after that they're claiming that it is Imran Khan who has given you the story, and it is against the Secret Act and whatever not? I mean, we understand that you cleared the story, but I want to ask you on the same, with the same question, I want to ask you another question, that your story published on August 9th. Imran Khan was arrested on August 5th. It's about like a 4-day difference. So I'm sure that you've been working on the story way before August 5th. Were you ever contacted by, or you were in contact with Imran Khan or any of his leadership, any of the party leadership regarding the Cipher?
Right. No, and in fact, even when I set up the interview with Imran Khan previously, I wasn't directly in contact with him. I was in contact with people around him. The only contact I had with him was during that interview, which we published, which is on air. I did not have any contact with anybody around him or anybody within PTI, during any of the process of the reporting, and that's actually somewhat unusual. Usually, toward the very end, we would go for a comment to everybody involved, and since Khan had publicly commented on this, the standard practice would be that you would go to Khan or the PTI for comment. Khan, obviously, by the time we published, was in prison, so we couldn't go to him, but we didn't go to anybody in the PTI because we understood that the kind of Pakistani establishment would immediately insist that they were our source. Now, to your other question, no, I don't actually think that this was a setup, because if it were a setup, I think they'd have done a couple things differently. One, I think they might have put something in the document that undermined the document. I think they would have given us the same copy that Khan had access to, and then asked us to publish that copy so that they would have a slam dunk case.
This is not the same copy that Khan had?
I don't want to comment on what copy we have, but the source would have given us the same copy that Khan had, and they would have asked us to publish the copy of it so that you could then link them directly. So I don't think that the Pakistani establishment needed any extra evidence or information, or to continue to bring cases against Imran Khan. The truth of the allegations doesn't seem to remotely have anything to do with whether or not they file cases and can even attain convictions, if you look at the conviction that he already has.
Okay. So regarding the media, then when I asked you, I wanted to ask another question related to that. We understand that in Pakistani media, they got the message from the powerful people not to invite you, not to cover the story, and no one invited you on any national TV. And this is the reason that I thought that maybe we can have a word with you. But why not anything on global media? I mean, this is supposedly one of the biggest stories. I mean, it's a regime change by the U.S., by the government. The U.S. government is involved in it. Washington, D.C. is involved in it. Why not? What could be the reason that the global media is not interested in your story?
The global coverage has been slim. You've had some coverage in the Guardian. You've had some coverage in the UK press. Obviously, the Indian press has covered it heavily. But you're right. In the United States, the media there has largely ignored, other than pressing the State Department after the story came out on the contents of the Cipher, they've largely ignored the story. And there is a U.S. role, and the U.S. State Department did repeatedly deny what we now know that they in fact did, which was encourage the ouster of Imran Khan. So you'd really have to ask a lot of these other media outlets. But I think you could. There's all sorts of armchair speculation that you could do. I think that if President Trump had been caught in this kind of a lie, I think that you would actually see wall-to-wall coverage of it. But that's not the situation that we're in now. It's the Biden administration, and I think it's probably complicated by the fact that this was related to Ukraine, and in the United States now, support among kind of the traditional establishment for the war in Ukraine is very high, and so maybe it gets too close to that question. But that's all speculation, if some of those editors would come on the program and answer the questions, I'd be interested to hear what they would say.
Okay, so we understand that it's a matter of whatever was happening in Russia and Ukraine, and U.S. wanted a different kind of, a specific kind of a response from Pakistan, which they didn't take any sides. But now the thing is it a routine matter for the powerful people, powerful countries, superpower like the U.S. to overthrow whoever they want to, like the prime minister? We have seen in the past too, like in 50s in Iran, we have seen some other places. We see, as a matter of fact, right now too, that they've been doing it. So do you think that it's okay to do that? I mean,
well, do I think it's okay? That's not up to me, but no, I don't personally think it's okay. I wouldn't say that it's common, but I wouldn't say it's unusual either. And you don't have to go back all the way to the 1950s either. You obviously have the violent overthrow of the Iraqi government, but that's a separate question. More recently, you've had kind of the U.S. intervening in political election or in politics in Honduras, for instance. There was a coup there in 2009 that's extremely complicated and involved domestic forces, but had certainly had the support of some elements of the U.S. apparatus, and that's just that's just one example. Like the United States is very willing to put its thumb on the scales of internal politics if they feel like their interests are on the line. That's how empires have always behaved and probably will always behave. So you can put a value judgment if you want on it, but you can also look at the repercussions for the internal politics of those countries, for the economy, for capital flight, for repression, for human rights. But oftentimes it doesn't even necessarily work out for the interests of the United States either.
All right. Now about the cable, the document the Cipher, the document that you have printed, that you got the copy and all that. What we have heard, and I think you have mentioned in the story too, in your story, that it has much toned down by Asad Majid, the ambassador. The real conversation was much more aggressive by the U.S. Either basically it's like a 9/11, right after the 9/11, when they called Pervez Musharraf that either you're with us or you're against us. So was it the same kind of tone that they have used? Either you remove Imran Khan through the vote of no confidence and he's not there anymore, or we're going to take action against him. So
what we do know is that the ambassador in his assessment did not leave any room for interpretation or any gray area. That his assessment, which people can read at the bottom of the cable, which is published at theintercept.com, is that Liu was speaking out of turn and that they ought to consider a démarche, from the Pakistani government to the United States to officially complain that this was out of turn, that this had gone far beyond kind of normal diplomatic back and forth. And so I think that if you look at that assessment and read between the lines of it, even the language that is quoted in the document is pretty direct. Like, people call it diplomatic, but it's not. You're not really couching what you're saying, behind much diplomatic ease when you say, if the no confidence vote succeeds, all will be forgiven. Like, that's pretty clear. Like, that you don't need kind of to have gone to Georgetown for foreign relations to interpret, what he's trying to say there.
Now, if I ask you that, if there is, like, because you're the one that who probably have more information about the story than what you published, if there is any person that there is a case against be in Pakistan, who would it be? Would you like to specify anybody? Because right now the case is against Imran Khan. He's already in jail for the political motivated case. They're ready to have another case, and another 170, 180 cases. If there is an investigation on Cipher, who do you think from the Pakistani side would be responsible, or there won't be any?
Well, I mean, I think the idea that with a situation like this, that the hunt would be for the source, that the criminalization would be about who blew the whistle on this, is misses the real point here. The point here is that this was a public service, that the public had a right to know this information, that the public had been debating what was said in this meeting and what the role of this meeting was in the unfolding of Pakistani politics for a year and a half. A democracy deserves to have an informed kind of democratic public. And so, I think the person who shared this document is a public servant and somebody who deserves public praise, not prosecution. But it was not Imran Khan. It was not anybody in his circle. I couldn't be any more clear about that.
Okay, all right, good to go. Now, if I ask you as a foreign observer audience, what Russia has said that Imran Khan is going through what he's going through right now because of the fact that he was not neutral about the Russia and Ukraine war. Do you think, is there any truth in it, or is just the absolutely not? He said to the aid that they were going to give to Afghanistan for the airspaces.
it really does feel like it's hard to say whether or not Russia-Ukraine was a final straw, or whether that was the kind of sole driving factor. Certainly, when he said absolutely not to the question of U.S. support, that didn't win him any friends in the Biden administration. But I think diplomats are used to politicians taking one stand publicly and then taking a separate stand privately, like that. The United States has that arrangement with a lot of leaders and a lot of governments around the world, that we're going to do X, but you're going to tell the public that we're not doing X. Like that's fairly normal. Now, if the State Department believed that he meant what he said, and if that belief was strengthened by his what they called quote unquote aggressive neutrality between Russia and Ukraine, then you could see how those things would then end up being linked up, and they would increasingly see Khan as somebody who's not willing to kind of take orders from Washington. And so there was also, and we write about this in the article, a critical hearing in the United States Senate in early March of 2022, where Chris Van Hollen, a Democratic senator from Maryland, who is one of the most kind of well-respected foreign voices on foreign policy in the Senate, particularly if you're somebody in the State Department. Van Hollen knows what he's talking about. He was a former staffer on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He's very much in that world. And so when Van Hollen speaks, people in the State Department listens. And Van Hollen really called Don Liu onto the carpet and said, you are here, complaining. You've complained that Imran Khan is not supporting Ukraine policy, but isn't it your job as a diplomat to speak to somebody in Pakistan ahead of time that if this is so important to us, that we ought to be, aggressively, using our powers of diplomacy in order to try to get the thing that we want out of the government. So why was the State Department not even bothering to talk to Pakistan? And so this was a very public kind of berating that Liu took from Van Hollen, and then it was only a few days later that this luncheon meeting happens, and you could sort of see kind of Liu kind of taking out the beating that he took on the Pakistani ambassador. So I think you have to understand that kind of relationship as well to understand how this unfolded. And also, as we also mentioned in the story, this came the day after Khan's well-publicized remarks responding to EU diplomats saying something along the lines of, who do you think we are? We're not going to be your slaves. We chart our own course. We're friends with Russia. We're friends with the United States. We're friends with Ukraine. We're friends with China. We're friends with everybody. And so I think that those two things, that Senate hearing plus Khan's speech, probably intensified emotions going into it.
Okay, so hear me out. Okay, me as a Pakistani citizen, if somebody tells me, whoever that country is, it tells me that we want to remove your elected prime minister and we do not agree with that, don't the U.S. establishment and the people in the Oval Office or whatnot, don't they think that the country is going to have more hatred towards their foreign policy towards them? And this is why, and then they complain about a lot of people in that part of the world do not like U.S. And why would they, if they come up with the policies like this? Imagine this, that a Pakistani establishment is telling the U.S. Ambassador, calling them and asking them to remove Biden, or we're not going to go ahead with you. A country with a 240 million population, a nuclear power, how could you dictate like this?
The United States has been doing this, largely since World War II around the world. And the United States manages to maintain, some, significant support from populations around the world. Even in Iran, for instance, there's a lot of kind of support for the idea of the United States, even if there is a lot of kind of hostility towards a lot of American leaders. Some of that has to do with kind of American pop cultural hegemony. Everywhere you go, you hear American music, you see American movies. The ideas that animate America are inspirational to people around the world. But yes, the actual practice of American hegemony creates enormous numbers of critics around the world who say that the ideals that you're preaching and sometimes trying to implement at the barrel of a gun don't match up with what you're doing in practice. The most clear hypocrisy, of course, and contradiction would be that the entire rationale for ousting the democratically elected government of Pakistan was to support sovereignty in a different country, Ukraine. So the entire thing kind of just falls apart amid its own contradictions, just right there at the very beginning. But the United States, foreign policy has always been, since World War II, to do what it can get away with, and it continues, as a kind of sole superpower to be able to, exercise that kind of power. And it's, I think the amount of power that the United States has is really brought into stark relief here, because in some ways it's not as if we don't have any evidence that Joe Biden called a meeting and said, this is what I want to happen. Rather, we have one United States senator putting pressure on one, U.S. State Department official, who then reams out a Pakistani ambassador, who then writes a cable that is, available very widely in the government, and gives insight into what the U.S. State Department said at this meeting. And then you have people, switching their votes, and you have the no confidence vote go the way it did. And so it's almost as if the United States has enough power to kind of just completely destroy other countries' democracies with the flick of a wrist, without even putting a whole lot of energy into it.
Because the reason I asked you this question is people feel insulted. There are like good 70 to 80% people, support Imran Khan in this country. Not only that, but let me. I want to mention this here, and I'm sure, Ryan, you know it, that Imran is not anti-U.S. He's not against America. He's not against the American thing, but he's not anti-America, but he's pro-Pakistani. So, and he has mentioned over and over again that, all the policies that I have, or I am going to look for, the first thing, my responsibility is my 240 million people back there, So how he become a persona non grata only because that he is not doing what they wanted him to do, or not exactly on the same page as the U.S. establishment wanted. So, but the part of the question also is that, do you think that because of the Democratic government, because you have said a few things about Biden and administration, so if the government changes and the Republican comes, and what if Trump comes back into power? Do you think that there will be a shift of policy from the United States, or is it going to stay the same for Imran Khan especially?
It would depend on who was influencing President Trump. Now, I think, just from my own perspective as a political reporter here in the United States, I don't think there's much chance. I think there's a very slim chance that Trump wins the White House in 2024. But it's not out of the question. He certainly could. I think it depends on who successfully, wins internal power struggles. If it's people that are, have been following this issue and care about it, then I think Trump, and I think Trump, the more that this situation becomes associated with Biden, the more that Trump would want to reverse it. I think that the reason, for instance, that Trump pulled out of Obama's Iran deal was not because he didn't like the Iran deal, it's because it was Obama's Iran deal, and he just wanted to undo whatever Obama had done. Certainly there were, the pro-Israel lobby and others were pushing him to do it, but mostly it was about just being against whatever Obama was for. And so I can imagine Trump trying to reverse it just for that reason. But it very much depends on who has his ear at any given moment. Okay,
I just have last two questions, and very quickly, I want to ask you: why does U.S. always deal? What would be your opinion? Why would always U.S. deals with the Pakistani military establishment, but not the elected government? We have had the elected government for the past about like good 15 years now. But sure, before that it was a dictatorship. There was a dictator who was ruling the country, but there was still a democratic process. But they always, whenever they visit Pakistan, they got to visit the Prime Minister's office and the GHQ too. So why is that? Why is there ties? This is against the American democratic values itself.
Well, I think you have to look at the time frame. The interest that the United States had in Pakistan was mostly related to Afghanistan, and somewhat in let's say countering the rise of China, but mostly we're talking about military cooperation as it relates to the drone war in Pakistan, but also in Afghanistan. And so I think the United States just was in the habit of paying lip service to the civilian government over in Pakistan. They probably felt that they just didn't need to.
Okay, one last question about the U.S. government and the Biden administration, if I may. We have seen the human rights violation from the last 16 months over and over again. 10,000 people were abducted. People have been picked up. They're being in the court. I mean, for the wrong allegations, political motivated cases against Imran Khan, against the party. Why not? There is any human right, violation or human right. I mean, the voices from the U.S., especially from the Oval Office, I'm talking about, or the Biden administration, in the favor of the party who's going through whatever they're going through from the last 16 months. And they said that it has nothing to do with us. It's their internal matter.
I mean, the rules for countries that are, in line with the United States are different than the rules for countries that are either, adversarial to the United States or are non-aligned. And to answer a question that you brought up earlier about Imran Khan being kind of pro-Pakistan, Pakistan first, he I'm sure is familiar with the history of the non-aligned movement during the Cold War. There was an effort by dozens of of significant countries to kind of put together a bloc that would say, look, we care about our interests and our populations first. We are not aligned either with the Soviet Union or with the United States. We're a non-aligned bloc that is interested in economic growth and et cetera for our own people. And the United States response to that was to treat people who were non-aligned as adversarial. It was a very, Bush put it into words when he said, you're either with us or against us. But that was kind of the American foreign policy throughout the Cold War. And there's never been a day where the United States said, oh, we're no longer operating under that assumption. Like that is still how we see it, that the United States sees it, that if you are not an active ally in all matters with the United States, then you are an adversary. And so the idea that you can be non-aligned and have the United States treat you as neutral, for the most part, there are some countries that might be an exception. Maybe you're powerful enough, like India, you can kind of get away with that. But for the most part, the United States is just not going to countenance that. And then it's up to that country whether or not they can kind of withstand that pressure.
Okay. I said the last question, but because of this discussion, I have another question, and then I'm going to let you go. I'm sorry. That question is, do you think that if the military establishment took a stand with the elected prime minister, with Imran Khan, results would have been different?
Well, yes. I mean, I think that what the meeting between the ambassador and Don Lu did was signal to the military that if it decided that this is the move that it wanted to take, that it would have U.S. permission. I don't think that the U.S., in order for the U.S. to kind of order it and direct it and insist upon it, they would have had to put more pressure on it than just kind of signaling from the assistant, Secretary of State at a luncheon meeting. What they were doing was they were riding on energy that was already there. I mean, that's my read of the situation. You may have your own independent view of that, but it's not as if the United States couldn't accomplish its objective, against the interests of the Pakistani military, because you always have divided loyalties, inside the military establishment. You can always find some people willing to take either side of an issue. And if the United States is taking one, that makes it more attractive to a lot of people. but they would have had to work harder. I think the fact that the military was moving away from Khan already is what kind of enabled Liu's meeting to just be the kind of final kind of push.
So that means that it started from home first before it went to the US.
And I think that Imran Khan has said that that's his new kind of analysis, and I think and he said that in my interview as well, and I think that's a rational kind of analysis.
Okay, Ryan, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And thank you for breaking the story, because that vindicated what Imran Khan has been saying for a long time. Nobody believed in the beginning. All these journalists who were asking you for the source, they've been saying that there is no cipher, and they can challenge that, and they'd probably leave journalism if there was a cipher. But thank you so much for being with us.
No, thank you, Ali.
Thanks. یہ تھی جی رائن گریم، آپ نے ان کی باتیں سنی، اور بڑی امپورٹنٹ بات ہے، میں جس پر وہ کروں گا. میں نے جب ان سے پوچھا کہ اگر پاکستانی ملٹری جو ہے، پاکستانی اسٹیبلشمنٹ جو ہے، وہ عمران خان کے ساتھ کھڑی ہوتی اپنے الیکٹڈ پرائم منسٹر کے ساتھ، تو کیا جو رزلٹ ہے وہ تھوڑا مختلف ہوتا؟ تو انہوں نے اس کے بارے میں کچھ نہیں کہہ سکتا کہ مختلف ہوتا یا نہ ہوتا. پرابلی پھر امریکہ جو ہے وہ اور زیادہ زور زبردستی کے ساتھ مداخلت کرنے کی کوشش کرتا. لیکن اصل میں جو امریکہ نے مداخلت کی وہ اسی وجہ سے کی کہ یہ جو سازش تھی یہ گھر میں پہلے تیار ہو چکی ہوئی تھی. تو اب آپ یورپ کی غلامی پہ رضامند ہوا تو مجھ کو تو گلا تجھ سے ہے، یورپ سے نہیں ہے. تو امریکہ کو، یہودیوں کو، کافروں کو، باقی لوگوں کو میرے خیال سے مورد اسلام ٹھہرانے سے بہتر ہے کہ ہم اپنے آپ میں، اپنے گریبان میں جھانکیں کہ ہم کہاں پر جا رہے ہیں، اس ملک کو کہاں پر لے کر جا رہے ہیں. آخر ہم کب تک کسی کی ایک فون کال پر اس طرح کے فیصلے کرتے رہیں گے؟ آخر کب تک یہ ہوگا کہ 24 کروڑ عوام جو کہ اپنا ہیرو ٹیپو سلطان کو مانتی ہے، اس کے جو فیصلہ کرنے والے ہیں وہ اب بہادر شاہ ظفر کے فالوورز ہوں گے؟ آخر کب تک ایسا ہوگا؟ زیادہ دیر چلے گا نہیں. میں بہت بار یہ کہتا ہوں، میں لکھتا ہوں اس بارے میں یہ کہہ بھی دیتا ہوں، یہ ملک جس جگہ پر پہنچ چکا ہے یہ ویسے نہیں چل سکے گا. اس کے بارے میں سوچنا پڑے گا، بیٹھنا پڑے گا، اس کو آگے لے کر جانا پڑے گا. اگر آپ سمجھتے ہیں کہ اسی طرح زور زبردستی دھونس سے یہ چل جائے گا، یہ نہیں چل سکے گا، یہ بہت زیادہ مشکل ہو جائے گا. اور یاد رکھیے گا، طاقت کا اصل سرچشمہ صرف اور صرف